Imagine writing a book, a letter, something like that, any sort of publication that is such a big deal, that causes such a big to-do, that literally you trigger an entire war. Could you do it? Could you do it? Could you put the pen to the paper knowing that you're signing away the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people? It's an interesting question. I say this because of a book that was created just before the Civil War called Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. This is a fascinating concept behind the idea that in some instances the pen may be more powerful than the sword. Harriet Beecher Stowe was an individual from the northern part of the United States. Her father was a pastor that you should be able to recall from the Second Great Awakening. And she wrote a book entitled Uncle Tom's Cabin. And what it was a fictional work based on historical events. Sounds pretty similar. Yeah, it's what a lot of books are. So Uncle Tom's Cabin takes place in the South of the United States. And the whole reason this book is such a big deal is because Harriet Beecher Stowe gives us this imagery of what slave trade and slaveholding was like. And we're not talking the roses by any means and the happiness. We're talking like the nitty-gritty, dark, sad, disgusting, violent pieces of the slave trade in the United States. And the reason why Abraham Lincoln would later say to her, "Oh, you're the little girl who started this great war," in relation to the Civil War, was because when this book was published and it was dispersed amongst citizens, you can buy a book, it was such an eye-opening experience for so many people, especially those in the North, because they had never actually interacted with slavery. Remember, at this point, the United States is kind of polarized. The North's sitting up here like, yeah, slavery, no thank you. South is like, we live and breathe this, right? So there's a lot of people in the North, an industrialized area, with a lot of people who really had no experience. They just heard about what slavery was. They didn't have the imagery behind it. So when Uncle Tom's Cabin comes out, the book, people suddenly go, oh my gosh, this is what's taking place. This is inhumane. This is barbaric. This is terrible. It's an eye-opening moment for a lot of people. Even though it was a fictional work based on true stories, should be noted, right? So because of that knowledge or that information that really gets dispersed to the public really culminates and brews up more tension and hostility. How dare the people of the South do this? How dare our nation do this? How dare we treat people like this? It becomes such an angry movement because of this book. Was that Harriet Beecher Stowe's intent? Probably not. There probably was an intent behind information, persuasion, probably not entertainment because that's a little dark. But to create an entire conflict, maybe not. And some historians also would argue that it was a catalyst or a piece that helped start the Civil War, but it wasn't the only reason. You could look at the annexation of Texas, the Compromise of 1850, the election of 1860, Uncle Tom's Cabin. All these big things come together in a span of less than 10 years. So there's a lot of different ingredients coming together that really brews up this civil conflict that takes place in the United States. But for all intents and purposes, it's important to note that when looking at conflict and like what starts conflict, it's easy to say so-and-so killed so-and-so, or so-and-so was mad at so-and-so politically, so it became a conflict. Right, true, not wrong. But other times it's important to realize that through works of literature, through reading, through media, through newspapers, through these other things that we kind of take for granted today, like that's what's used, or that's what was used in order to really kick up the dust for the public to be so upset about this. In the modern day, we can see the same exact thing. An individual is videotaped dying on the streets of Minneapolis, or I say videotaped, but like being recorded on a phone, on a smartphone. It gets distributed through social media. What does that do throughout the entire United States? Individuals are recording video of individuals inside the Capitol building on January 6th of this year. What does that do as it gets dispersed through social media? See, here's the crazy thing. We look at Harriet Beecher Stowe and her work from the 1800s and we go, oh my gosh, like you kickstarted an entire revolution. But we kind of do the same thing on a daily basis. You see one thing get recorded and then submitted online, and then it goes viral and everybody knows about it. And then everybody wants to take charge. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody wants to act on it. So maybe the lesson from this is, one, respect the power of the word when people write. That's the first thing. Two, understand the power of what happens when you read. But three, maybe also understand that we haven't changed that much. We've only changed the medium. It's no longer a book. It's a social media feed. It's a tweet. It's a TikTok. It's a post of some sort, right? That gets people really spurned and moving inside these movements. But we can trace a lot of that back to the origins of Harriet Beecher Stowe and her published work, Uncle Tom's Cabin, which I highly recommend you take a moment to read. There you go. Harriet Beecher Stowe, Uncle Tom's Cabin, another major ingredient leading up to the American Civil War.